Well, hello everybody. Welcome to virtual. We're back on a Thursday. Welcome to Virtual Thursdays Dire Literary Series. And today our feature is Gabby Gilliam. And let me let me see how smooth I can do this. There it is. Ta-da. And she devours words. She spits some of them back to create new things, dabbles in nearly everything. Poetry is her go-to, and also has some novels, some flash fiction, and short stories. And I like this much, much better than the canned intros, which is really kind of cool. But of course, if you look up here, everything you need to know about Gabby is on her website, gabbygilliam.com. So, hi and welcome.
Hi, and thanks for having me.
We're going to turn it over to you. So, are you ready?
Sure.
All right. Look forward to it.
Great. So first of all, thanks everybody for being here. Happy to be here. I'm going to be reading some poems from my chapbook, No Ocean Spit Me Out. I want to give a huge thanks to Old Scratch Press for publishing this chapbook for me. My co-pressmate here, Robert, for helping me be on the Dire Literary Series. The collection is kind of an exploration of family and memory and um, struggling with faith and then kind of growing into self-acceptance. Um, and so I feel like it's good to start with the first poem from the collection, which is called Visiting the North Country, because I feel like it's a really good intro to the rest of the poems. So, Visiting the North Country. I dream of the Adirondacks, rubbery brine of cheese curd chewed on the shores of Stillwater Reservoir, Krogan bologna on crackers, the unexpected tug on my line, yellow perch slick as memory, caught and released. So both of my parents are from upstate New York, a very, very rural part of New York. My mom's dad was a dairy farmer, so I grew up in a part of New York that nobody thinks about when they think about New York, and that features a lot in my poems. So the next poem I'm going to share with you is actually about my dad's dad, who we affectionately called Grandpa in the Woods because he lived deep in the woods. And this poem is called Blackberry Wine. You stumbled through the woods, crimson fingered, clothes stained, covered entirely in dark juice. Your hands are scratched and bleeding, both blood and juice running toward elbows. You tenderly pick one more plump, ripe blackberry. Place it in the bowl pinned between your hip and elbow. When you get home, you pour the berries into the tub, brutally mash them into little bits. Take all the juice from them you can. I've seen a winemaking gone bad, all over the walls and floor of your small bathroom, the bathtub littered with particles of stem and berries. I've tasted the results of a winemaking that hasn't gone bad, felt it burn all the way down. The glass jug was heavy and smelled nothing like berries, tasted nothing like berries. My throat burned for hours. The next poem I'm going to share with you is actually a high bun. It's called Going to Seed. This overgrown field smells like autumn afternoons, homework forgotten. High golden grass drinks waning sunlight, rotten crab apples crushed underfoot, the crunch of gravel beneath your tires as you snake down the long driveway, elbow propped out of your open window. Golden field stretches, shadows lengthening with time, gradual forest. Your truck idle in the driveway. Your ashes in a box on a shelf where the wind can't rustle your branches. And I stand alone in this new field, 100 miles from that old wildness. I crack a milkweed pod with my hands, free the seeds to find their own fertile earth. So my dad and mom were both Catholic. My dad was an altar boy in his youth. Um, and so I have a lot of poems that discuss Catholicism and my gradual distance from it. So this poem that I'm going to share next is called First Communion. I expected a burst of happiness on my tongue, the tingle of salvation as transubstantiated flesh tickled its way down my throat, but only found the whisper of crisp robes and a stale wafer, which melted into paste and tasted nothing like peace. I would have coughed to clear it from my mouth or spit it out if Jesus hadn't been watching from his crucifix, open wounds oozing with forgiveness. The next poem I'm going to share is where the chapbook gets its title from. And it is a poem about my dad, and it's called No Ocean Spit Me Out. You were born in a burst of sea foam, a pearl rising from sand, salt-kissed and beautiful. I was born in upstate New York. No, further north than that. Snow-kissed fingers and toes, never able to get warm. Your father wielded lightning, his fury immortal. My father wielded weed whackers and grill tongs, his anger dull sparks that failed to ignite, his love enduring beyond the limits of his mortality. Did Zeus ever tuck you in? Ignore the flashlight clutched beneath your sheets so you could read after lights out? Did he sing old gospel songs into the darkness while your eyelids grew heavy? Or did he only turn maidens into cows? The next poem is also about my dad. Um, a little sadder, this one. It's called My Apologies, Dad. The marbled stumps of graves poke out of overgrown grass, an army of gray thumbs in perfect, steadfast formation. We didn't open the windows or stop the clocks when you died. I hold my breath until we pass the final row, to avoid catching my death or angering an envious spirit with my functional lungs, my beating heart, my tightly pressed lips. I just learned you're supposed to tuck thumbs into fists while passing a cemetery to protect your parents. I never knew. So many ways I failed to protect you. The next poem I'm going to share is about my mom. And it was actually written for Rattle's Ekphrastic challenge, if any of you are familiar with that. It was, of course, not accepted for that challenge, but I really like this poem, and I think it captures my mom really well. She promised us each a quilt. The pain in my mother's wrists doesn't discriminate, throbbing with taut tissue as she pulls another stretch of quilt across the sewing machine's arm. Since my father's funeral, she has attacked her fabric stash, a torrent of stitches to distract her from his absence. She lets his loss pool in the shadows at her feet, nudges it aside to press the pedal as she feeds pinned squares to the needle. When the sun dips below the tree line, she leans over to turn on the light. All right, and I'm going to share two more. The first one is called My Morning Run Grants Absolution in Every Breath. I clutch at laces like rosary beads, taut knots instead of Hail Marys. Let my soles whisper penance to the pavement, while crisp autumn sunlight presses deliverance into my skin. And the last poem I'm going to share with you is called I Will Celebrate Each Revolution. I could devour this morning, belly full of dew-kissed grass, birdsong nesting gently in my throat, my breath fragrant with possibility, taste of dawn brilliant on my tongue. So thank you very much. Again, those were all from No Ocean Spit Me Out. It's my chapbook that is out from Old Scratch Press.
Thank you. I totally enjoyed your reading, and that was just such a great work. And I love the brevity of your short work. And We already have a question in the chat from Robert, which is I'm going to go right to because I have almost the exact same question. So I'm going to merge them together.
Okay.
So in your bio, you said you spit words out, and the title of your book has spit in it. And Robert noticed were you inspired by other spits, like Zeus spitting children out of his forehead, the whale spitting Jonah out. I have a funny feeling that Robert might know the answer to this already. So tell me about your history with spit.
So it's funny because I actually like I hate spit. I hate watching people spit. I hate it when people spit. But that being said, it's such a good word. It has some great sounds in it, the P and the T, and it just like it's a very impactful word when you say it. And I feel like it just there's always a lot of emotion behind it because most of the time spitting, it's not a passive thing. Like you are choosing to do it and it requires effort. Um, and so while I hate it, I don't think I've ever noticed that it does appear as often as it does in my work until you have brought it to my attention. Um,
Now you'll never use it again.
no, I'm sure I will because like I said, I do like the word itself. I just don't enjoy the act. Um, and so it Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm gonna have to go back and look at the rest of my work now and see if it does appear more often. Um, but I feel like in the painting of Aphrodite that inspired No Ocean Spit Me Out, she is just like bursting out of it, and it does look almost like it's just spitting her out for all of us to see. Um, and so I just felt like, I'm in stark contrast to that. So no ocean spit me out. Um, and so it was not actually an intentional thing.
So you also say earlier in your bio that poetry is your go-to. What's your next up?
So other than poetry, believe it or not, it would be novels, which they seems to be very at odds with each other.
Not at
Um,
all.
I struggle more with short fiction because I feel like there's always more to be said. And so with short stories, I have a tendency to feel like they're not finished. So I do have some short stories and I do write short stories sometimes, but they have a tendency to turn into longer things like novellas or even a full-length novel. So poetry first and then probably novels second.
So say you had like 30 minutes to write anything. What do you do? What would be pure enjoyment for you?
I think my default setting is poem. And so if I sat down, that would probably be the first thing that came out. Um, but every once in a while, I'll surprise myself. So I do a teen writing workshop at the library, and I will write with them. And one of the things that we do is a 10-minute warm up. Just we sit down and just write for 10 minutes with no prompts, no nothing. And sometimes I will write a story, or at least the beginning of a story during that time. Um, but like I said, I almost always feel like it's going to become something longer, where I'm like, I really like this, but I feel like this isn't enough. And so I always feel like my short stories are really just a novel in process.
Now, your poetry journey, you went from writing preteen angst poems like most of us do, and then you got that sort of workshopped out of you. Do you still feel any angst? Do you write like older person angst poems or I mean there's a lot of angst in the world right now because I didn't
Mhm.
hear any angst in anything that you read tonight.
So I for sure have them. And I even considered reading one. I decided to keep my reading tonight all within my chapbook, but I did print one out that is a poem about Medusa that is pretty angsty, and considered reading it tonight. So that angst does still creep in, but I feel like it's not the emo poetry that 16-year-old Gabby brought to her creative writing class in high school. Um, I did not take that many classes on writing poetry in college, but I did have the honor of taking a poetry workshop with Claudia Emerson, who went on to win the Pulitzer after I had her for poetry. So that was
Maybe you
amazing.
influenced her work.
But she did workshop some things with us,
Yeah.
but I'm sure that we did not help her as much as she helped herself. But it was awesome that she um, brought her own things and she was like, I'm not gonna ask anything of you that I won't do myself. And that's why I bring that same energy to my teen writing workshop. I'm not gonna have them do any kind of exercise. I'm not gonna do myself. Um, and I did start writing more poems about my family when I took her class. And I think that that did shift the way that I approached my own poetry and the topics that I chose to write about when I would sit down to write.
Now, would you approach a Pulitzer Prize winning poet for like a blurb or an endorsement? And did you?
Um, if Claudia was still alive, I definitely would have reached out to her. She was one of my favorite professors I ever had. Um, and I used to go to her poetry readings and things even years after I had graduated from college. So I probably would have reached out to her just because we have that personal connection. But I don't think there's any way I could convince myself to do that with somebody who was a stranger and just be like, hey, person who's like amazing at this thing I do, please read my stuff and say it's good. I don't think I could ever bring myself to do that.
Were you
I'm just
comfortable?
shy.
Were you comfortable getting the blurbs for your new book here?
So I reached out to mostly pe poets that I know. So again, like I'm much more comfortable reaching out to someone that I have a connection with, even if I've taken a workshop with them or if um we have been like we're in mutual circles on Facebook or something, and so we've talked about work, or if we've shared table space at like a book festival or something. So I'm much more able to reach out to someone if I can even claim any tenuous relationship with them at all. So I did not reach out to any strangers when I was requesting blurbs.
You introduced a poem tonight as a high bun. For people that don't know that form, what is that form?
So a high bun combines prose with haiku. And so sometimes it'll be just a paragraph of prose and then a haiku at the bottom. Mine actually has two haiku in it, and then two bits of prose that are in between them. So it's the blend of different poem genres.
Going off the board here. This is where I get into trouble. Your poems about organized religion, you were kind of introduced why they've changed and what your feelings are. So why do Christians support such unchristlike things today?
That's a good question, and I wish that I could answer it, but I feel like that's part of the reason that I've strayed so much. But even by the time I was in high school, Um, and I have a poem about this. It's not in this book, but like my mom had to bargain with me to get me to go through my confirmation classes when I was in high school because I had put it off. Like you're supposed to be confirmed in middle school sometime, I think. But I drove myself to my confirmation classes. So like I had definitely I was definitely past when it was supposed to happen, but we made a
The Billy
bargain.
Madison of
I
confirmation
was
class.
the Billy Madison of confirmation class. But because my mom made a deal with me and she was like, if you get confirmed, I won't make you go to church anymore. And I was like, bet I'm gonna hold you to that. And
What hypocrisy within the hypocrisy?
I know, but it was a deal I took. And then like you have to have a confirmation sponsor. And my best friend in high school had already been confirmed. So I hit him up and I was like, hey, you're my sponsor. So like with two 16-year-olds like hanging out at the confirmation thing with a bunch of, younger kids. Um, but so like even then I wasn't really feeling it. And I feel like things have gone even so much further astray, I feel like, for organized Christianity since then. Um, and so I think it's just I don't foresee ever finding my way back to that, especially if it continues. But I have no idea what has brought it to this point.
Now, did your mom make you post for pictures like this?
Let me think about that.
A
I can't,
series of my
it's
whole
been so
family.
long ago that I'm like, did I? Probably not. I probably would have not agreed to that.
Like I think, in my opinion, is if they want to promote the Catholic Church to young people, they should make like the body of Christ like a Snickers bar or something. Like there's the flat host, it just doesn't cut it anymore.
It's not good. It's not
You need
tasty.
a
And I
slogan.
remember like being so excited, like in that poem, like I said, I remember being so excited. Like it seemed like such this amazing thing because only grown-ups get to do it, right? So like when you go for the first time, you're expecting it to be this amazing experience, and then it's just like a thin, stale piece of bread that melts and gets all sticky and weird on your tongue.
Now, 2021, let's go back on the board here. 2021, hmm, suddenly I have a craving for like a tuna melt. All right, so 2021, you resolved to get 100 rejections. In other words, you're resolving to submit. It's more of a resolution to submit rather than to get rejected. So how many rejections? What was the final count? And by the end of the process, was the percentage of your acceptances going up?
Actually be able to answer that to the number. Give me a second.
All right, here we go. She's gonna pull there she is.
Yeah. Oh, I had it printed out. I gave a workshop on um publishing, and I used those figures to like talk about not being discouraged. And I don't have them with the rest of my workshop materials that happen to be sitting right here on the floor. Um, but I want to say, I mean, I surpassed 100. Oh, I was probably 200 by the end of the year. Um, but my like publishing percentage, I want to say I had like 12 to 14% acceptances that year also, which shockingly turns out to be above average, because Duotrope will tell you that like if, and so they'll give you a little asterisk if your percentage is above average. And so I remember being conflicted about those numbers because at first it seems like that's a lot of rejection. It's a lot of people telling you no. But at the same time, like it lets you know that you're not alone because with that, very small percentage, you're still above what most people are seeing. Um, and so I don't know. So it's hard to, you have to have some thick skin, but it's good to know going in that like rejection is going to be the standard. It's the acceptances that are going to be rare.
And
Um,
even if you get a rejection, it doesn't mean that your work was bad, right?
right. Sometimes they just, they were already full, or what they accepted kind of started to all be aligned to a theme, and what you submitted to them just doesn't fit with everything else. And so, rejections come in tiers. And so you might get one that's like, hey, this wasn't a fit, but please submit to us again. And a lot of times the journals mean it. Like if you get that rejection and it says to submit to them again, do it because that means that they liked your work enough to offer you that encouragement. It's not the blanket, no thanks, that usually comes when you're getting a rejection. And so that helps too. Like when you get those, and then there's the rare gem that will actually give you some feedback, and they'll say, we really especially liked this one, but it wasn't quite a fit for this issue. So we really hope that you're going to find a place for it somewhere else. And that helps encourage you too. Even though it's a rejection, like it lets you know that you're at least like, it's close. There's a good chance somebody else, like that poem is going to work for them.
Yeah, I just got one of those this week. But it's also important to note. I mean, sometimes when I'm doing a publishing workshop myself, I'll do this little poll, like how many of you like Taylor Swift, and some hands go up and some hands down. How many like Shakespeare? How many like Beethoven? How many like whoever? And basically, I say none of those people suck, but you're gonna run into, no matter who you are, people that just are not gonna like you as part of the play.
Right? You can't please everyone. And like writing's very subjective. It's going to resonate with some people deep. And then other people are going to be like, this is, this does nothing for me. And so you just have to find your audience. And if you keep putting it out there, you'll find them eventually.
Exactly. Your fiction seems to be more spirit-based, supernatural. So when you are in your fiction head and not your poetry head, do you feel like you have to screw your brain in, or is it like screw a different brain in, or is it a natural transition?
A lot of times it happens naturally. Like the last short story that I wrote, or well, the beginnings of one, it's not finished, was with my team poetry writing group. We met in October, and so I gave them the theme of ghosts, and we went and we looked for ghost storybooks in the library, and then they all brought one back to like inspire them. And so then I set the 10-minute timer. I was like, all right, go for 10 minutes. And then I ended up writing a vampire story. And I was like, hey, I broke my own rule and it's not about ghosts at all. But this is what I came up with. Um, I feel like when it comes to fiction, I have a tendency to go to like a fantasy place anyway. And so walking that line between like fantasy and horror or dark fantasy is not such a leap. Um, and that's like I read a lot of that too. So when I'm in a fiction space, I think that that's just kind of what comes out.
When you does the world prompt you? In other words, you see something, you think of something, or do you sit down and like, I'm going to write about my father here, or I'm going to.
I would say it's a little bit of both. So sometimes like something specific will happen and I'm like, okay, I need to write that down. Um, and I have notebooks everywhere. I mean, I have one in my car, I have one at my desk at work, I have them all over my house. And if for some reason I don't have a notebook, I will write on literally any paper surface and then just transfer it later. I am also a very like I have to write things by hand. Like, I have a hard time sitting down
Yeah,
and typing.
when you have those notebooks lying around or a napkin or whatever, is it just a line and then this is the catapult, or do you have to write like a whole stanza or
It can be either of those things. So sometimes it is just a line, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to come back to this. Like I did that the other day. I have two really good lines that I thought of while running. Um, and I wrote them down as soon as I got home so I wouldn't forget them. And eventually I'll go back and I'll turn them into whatever poem was starting to percolate at the time. But I also write really well under time constraints. So there will be times where like I sit down and I'm like, okay, I've got 10 minutes, and then I will um, you know, just sit down and write whatever I can think of in that 10 minutes. Or I'll give myself like a randomly generated word bank and I'll see what I can do with the words that the internet has given me. Um, and so sometimes it is spontaneous, and other times I do kind of force it, just depending on how I'm feeling at the moment, I guess. Like if I haven't written in a while, sometimes I'll sit down and just make myself write something. I used to write a poem a day, like I almost like it was a journal. I would write a poem before I went to bed. Um, but I have kind of fallen out of that habit. So I'm hoping to pick it back up again. But it was good just to keep that habit of writing going.
you said you find like banks of words on the internet. Do you use like a random word generator?
I do. I literally just Googled random word generator, and whatever the first one that was that pops up, that's what I would click.
There used to be one called randomwordgenerator.com, but they changed to watch out for snakes, and that's I don't know why, but that's the one I use.
Nice.
So I always think that I'm, writing like snakes on a plane poem or something. But anyway, so what's next for you? I know that AWP is coming to Baltimore in 2026, but what's next for you between here and there? And are you thinking about a panel for your local AWP?
I would love to do a panel for a local AWP, but I have not started planning anything per se. I am hoping to start putting together a full-length manuscript sometime soon. Um, it will likely explore a lot of the same themes that are in this chapbook because I have a lot of poems on those topics. And so I've been looking at what other poems I might be able to add to the ones that are in here. Um, and like I said, I do have a lot of novels that are just sitting waiting for edits that eventually I will get to. Um, and so I would like to get a couple more novels out there. I do have two novellas that are out. They are more of a spooky bent. They're kind of like a zombie story. Um,
Are these
but
them?
that is them. So Trouble in Tomsk is the first one, and then Chasing a Cure is its sequel. I had actually originally written them during NaNoWriMo. I asked my son one year, I was like, hey, what should I write about? And his answer was zombies, because he was really into Plants vs. Zombies at the time. I had never written anything about zombies, and like I don't really read zombie stories. But I did it. Your book. Yes, see, that's my son.
There he
Um,
is.
so I wrote this book for him. This is him. Hi. Okay, bye. And I it was written as a novel, and then I saw like an open call for a horror press. They were looking for novellas. And I said, you know what? This has like a really clear, like I have a good stopping point midway through. I could totally make the first half of it a novella. And it like I'm gonna give it a shot. So I did. I cut it, sent the first half to them, and they liked it. They were like, we're gonna publish it. And they had asked is there any more of it? And I was like, well, actually, yes, there is. And so then I kind of tweaked the second half so that it was more of a sequel versus just picking up where the first one left off. So I went through and edited it so that they were two standalone novellas, and Black Hare Press published the second one also.
Well, awesome. It's great to have you on as a guest and hear your wonderful work. You want to find out more, it's Gabby Gilliam, 2Ls.com. And that's her page that we're looking at right now. Thank you so much. It was great having you.
Thank you again for having me.
And I'm gonna shut the stream off for folks that are watching it on Facebook. Our next diary is in 3 weeks because of Thanksgiving. But if you want to come and join us for the open mic right now, please use the link and we'll see you later. Oh, almost